In today's video, we're going to talk about the humble half square triangle. We've all made one, but how we made them in all the different techniques and methods that there are. So make sure you check out this video and let us know down in the comment section if you've tried all these different methods. Let's get started. So guys, as I've been thinking about all the different ways to make a half square triangle, we're going to just walk ourselves through these and also rate them in the best to worst category, okay? We're gonna start off with the one that is probably the most logically sound, however, less in practice, which is you take a 5-inch square, you're gonna chop it in half on the diagonal, and we're gonna sew these two pieces together, creating ourselves a half square triangle, which I'm gonna do right now. Now, some of you out there are already gonna see the problems with this. I'm gonna put this into my sewing machine. I'm gonna give it a good iron, and I'm going to open up the edge, and ta-da, a half square triangle. Now, let's talk about this, let's rate it, let's go through it. I give this like a 2 out of 10. Here's the reason being. As soon as you cut a square in half, that way we can match these together, you have now created a bias edge, which is stretchy, okay? So there's a lot more fudging that will have to happen in your quilt because you're stretching your fabric out as you're sewing it. Now, that looks like a pretty good half square triangle. I've sewn for a long time, so I can help mitigate that, but there's better ways to do this, okay? Let's move on to method number 2. Method number 2 is the tried and true. Everyone's done this one. It's how this quilt here is made. And guys, link for that quilt down in the description below. I'm going to go ahead and put down my square. And since we're doing demos, guys, I'm gonna use a Sharpie here to give you a very clear line of what I'm doing here. That way everyone at home can see. I've drawn a line all the way down, and I'm gonna sew on both sides of that line 1/4 inch away. So I'm gonna sew essentially down on both sides there. Now, I've taken away all the bias here. We're gonna cut directly on that line that we've made across, which obviously if it was a pencil line, I would be cutting out any visible markings, but I'm giving you guys the best look today. Iron this thing out, and you got yourself some half square triangles. This is the tried and true method. Everyone uses this. Every pattern at this point is written this way. However, there are still some of the old school patterns that are written using the bias edge way. Doesn't mean that they're wrong. We've gotten the same results, right? Probably, in my opinion, you gotta give that at least an 8 out of 10. That's a great method to do it. It's tried and true. Everyone's got this, okay? Next one coming up, probably the most wasteful, but you will see it happen often in quilts, is that you take your squares, I'm going to draw directly across, and I'm going to sew directly on that line. Okay, I'm going to sew directly on that line. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to cut 1/4 inch away from that seam. So this would be considered waste. And then I've got my half square triangle. Let me iron this out. Which looks just like that. Now, some people are going to say, whoa, Tiankin, why would anyone ever do that? It's so wasteful. It is wasteful. However, it's used a lot in really small piecing, right? If you're making a 2-inch finished half square triangle, 1.5 inch finished half square triangle, they use this method often because normally it's all the little scraps from your project for a little cornerstone or something like that that they're adding to a block. So it is used in the industry. I would probably give this a 5 out of 10. It works, it does exactly what you want it to. However, I don't like the waste. And then if you wanted to use up this waste, it's now on the bias. So I would probably give it a 4 out of 10. I changed my number now, 4 out of 10. Because I don't like working with the bias and I don't like the waste. I'll give it 4 out of 10, okay? Now the next one, I'm gonna use a larger square for this. More ways to make half square triangles is to get multiple half square triangles out of the same piece of fabric. Easy, easy, easy. I'm gonna lay these down here, right sides together. I'm gonna sew all the way around my square. Pretty simple. Turn. Home stretch. I've sewn all the way around. I'll flip this over so you guys can see. I've sewn all the way around. And now I'm going to cut this into 4 half square triangles. So essentially I'm going to cut a big X into it. And I've got 4 half square triangles. Let me iron these out. So we end up with 4 half square triangles. Now, I'm a big believer in this method. I use it all the time because out of a 10-inch square, I got 4 like 6.5 inch half square triangles with standard block size, which is awesome. And obviously, I can do this with 9-inch squares. I can do it with 4-inch squares. The method works with any size, but I like to get some jumbo blocks. That's the way I like to do it. Makes it super easy. I'm gonna give this one 8 out of 10, 8.2. I like it a little bit more than the small, like charm pack method that we always are seeing, just because you're getting more out of it and you're getting bigger pieces. I'm a big fan of that. Big fan of that. Now the next one, I'm gonna take the same thing. I've got a 10-inch square that I'm gonna be using, and again, it works with any size. Now I'm going to draw an X. Last time I cut an X, this time I'm drawing an X. I'll use the Sharpie again just so everyone can see at home. Now, different than last time is I'm going to sew on both sides of the X, or my lines here, just like I did when I was doing 2 at a time, except I'm going to do it in a much larger scale here. So I'm going to give some dabs here so you guys can see my stitch line. Super simple, and I'll show you once it's sewn as well. So that's one set of stitching there. I'm going to do it to the other side. And I'll show you my X. Makes that pretty simple. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut vertically, horizontally, and the X, okay? So here's my vertical. Here comes the horizontal. And then I'm going to cut the X. But if you pause right here, that is my traditional method, right? Where I drew the lines, sewed on both sides of that smaller square and got 2. It's essentially you're making 4 sets of those at the same time. And now I have 8 half square triangles. Let's get those ironed up. Absolutely fantastic method, 8 at a time. This is probably one of my most preferred methods. I'm going to give it a 9 because I love it so much. Because you can get 8 of the same size half square triangle. You are only sewing for a couple of minutes, and they are just perfectly uniform. Fantastic way to do it. A lot of quilts, you have a lot of half square triangles like you see behind me. So if you can do them in bulk, that's fantastic. However, I'm going to change my score now. Actually, I'm going to put this down to a 7 because it shines in bulk. However, if these pieces all need to be different colors, you know, bulk's not always the best option to go with. That's the reason why when you're doing them 2 at a time, you would just get a set of 2 as opposed to a set of 8. So in bulk, like quilts like this behind me, I give it a 10 out of 10. However, lots of quilts, you need a lot more variety. I'm gonna put it at 7. I think that's fair. I think that's fair. My next and final way to make a half square triangle is one of my most preferred. I love this method. I enjoy making this method because it's the least amount of stitching, most amount of quantity, and you can get some variations in there as well, which I do like. But let me just show you the tried and true method, which is called tube piecing. Now, tube piecing, I've got a strip, I'm gonna lay it down like so, and I've got another strip, I'm gonna lay it down right on top of it. Obviously, this would be right sides together, and I'm gonna sew down the length on both sides of this strip set here. So I sewed down the first side, I'm gonna turn it, sew down the second side. I have sewn down both sides of this tube now. Now they call it tube piecing because it is a tube, right? You could flip this out, right sides out if you wanted to. It's sewn and sealed on both sides. To get our half square triangles, you use a 45-degree ruler, which looks just like this. And all you're gonna do is you're gonna place it here, and I'm going to do, let's do like a 5-inch finish. We can get 6 out of it, we might as well. And I'm going to cut, slide that down just a little bit. And I'm going to cut out my half square triangles. And I'm going to take this ruler, I'm going to turn it over, line it up with the same marks. Another one. Now there's just a hair of waste on this, just the tiniest bit. It's not very much, about 1/8 of an inch per cut. So that's my waste. It's an itty bitty waste per cut. I think that's within reason, and I'm going to just strip set this whole thing out. Now, okay, as far as math goes, it's the easiest one, because with 10-inch squares, you can sew them this way and get this measurement and this way and this measurement, and you have to adjust your sizes. With 2-piecing, right now I'm cutting 6.5-inch half square triangles. Now, if you don't mind wasting a little bit, in the same method, I could shrink this down to be 5-inch finish just by moving it that much. Now I've got 5-inch finishes. So I love this method because at one strip, I can move my dimensions as much as I need it to. I'm gonna throw in a little 3-inch square here, a little 3-inch half square triangle. So if you're doing a quilt that requires lots of different sizes, this is just the easiest way to get all those sizes. And then if you have any waste, like on this one, I'm gonna cut this all off here. What I can do is I can judge my waist a little bit too if I have to cut out multiple different sizes. What I'll do is cut these down to a smaller size that is what I like to use the best. For instance, 2.5-inch squares. I can make sure I get a nice sized scrap for one of my other future projects, or in this case, right, I could add cornerstones to a project, no problem, 2.5-inch squares. I probably could even get a 3.5 out of that. So it helps you be able to measure your scrap and your waste too if you need multiple sizes out of the same strip set, which again, I love this method. If I had to give this method a rating, I'd probably give it a solid 9. It's very versatile. The one thing that's lacking is that one strip set, I can't make one side blue and one side, or the next one pink, you know, like you have to stay within your strip set that you have. But also you can add to this kind of strip set. What I mean by that is, I'm not gonna talk about that actually. So let's go over all these like once more and let's see if we can kind of nail down, I don't know what I'm saying. So those are all the different ways that I could think of how to make a half square triangle, and we'll go over them really quickly here at the end just so we're all on the same page. So the first method was to make your actual triangles themselves and sew them together. However, these become stretchy because you're sewing on a biased edge. Gives you the same result, but it's sewn on a biased edge. The next method was to take 2 squares, draw a line in the middle and sew on both sides of the line, and you come out with a beautiful half square triangle, and you get 2 per time that you're sewing. Love it, tried and true method. Everyone knows how to do it. However, my big thing with this one is that you're only getting 2. It's way better than the last one, but you are only getting 2 half square triangles. And some projects need it, but I would prefer to get more half square triangles than just 2 at a time. Third method was to sew all the way around and then cut a big X into our block, which gave us 4 half square triangles at a time, which I'm a big believer in this one. This is probably the most, it's really easy to do, it's really easy to make. There's really no fuss with it. But again, if I'm doing this method, I'm getting more than the last method. Downside to this is that you can't get different colors. It's always gonna be in sets of 4, but in my personal belief, everything has at least 4 half square triangles in it, so it's a tried and true method for myself. Then you have the 8 at a time method, which is where we drew an X, sewed on both sides of those lines, and then we cut it into 8 equal pieces, which gave us a beautiful 8 half square triangles. Let me grab them all. Just a beautiful set of half square triangles, 8 at a time. Again, where it lacks is that they have to be in sets of 8s. There's no, you can't change out your colors, okay? But more is better in my opinion when you're making half square triangles, because I think every quilt requires at least some half square triangles. And so if I can knock them out faster, I'm all about that. Now the most versatile in my opinion is where we took a tube and we sewed it together. I don't have my tube. Is where we made our long tube, and then we were able to cut out our half square triangles. Has a little bit of waste, not too much, and you end up with these beautiful half square triangles. But what I love about it is that while you're making these, you can judge your waste or your scraps. In addition to that, it's really easy to end up with a bunch of different sizes if needed in your project. You can see I've got 6.5, 5.5, 4.5, and 3.5 all out of the same strip, and there's not any additional math that's required. So all in all, every one of these methods you're going to see in the quilting industry, and everyone has their preferred, okay? You guys can probably tell I do love strip piecing. I've always have. If you're a 2 at a time, a 4 at a time, even an 8 at a time person, it's wonderful. And also let me know if I've missed any method down in the comment section as well. And like I said at the very beginning of this video, guys, half square triangles are kind of the fundamental quilt block of our industry. Every quilt has them. The quilt that we have in the back right now is a free pattern that you can download off of soyaquilting.com. All our patterns are free. And guys, if you've liked this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and don't be afraid to share it with your friends. As always, we appreciate you and appreciate the support, and we're gonna see you next time here at Soya Quilting.